Chapter 80. Meeting Brian again, Edrin set aside his feelings of gratitude and pushed his glasses up from the bridge of his nose, adopting his professional demeanor to answer Damian's question. Marco and his people have occupied a little over 30% of the outer region so far. They've sent us about 500,000 Federation coins total. He paused, pulling out a small datapad to reference the detailed reports. According to Marco, establishing the orphanages is consuming the vast majority of our capital at the moment. Running them properly will require even more ongoing investment. I see. Use that money to get everyone their choice of weapons when you visit the city later. Make sure they get quality equipment, not cheap garbage. Damian's voice was tired, his exhaustion obvious. And explain to me why the progress of occupying the region is moving so damn slowly. 30% in 2 months seems pathetic considering they already had 10% under their control. He sat back down heavily in the chair, looking completely drained. One of the Mafia members, Marcus if Damian remembered correctly, suddenly pulled a beer from his jacket pocket and placed it on the desk in front of Damian with an oddly proud expression. Damian stared at him speechlessly for a moment, then shrugged and cracked open the bottle. He hadn't had anything to drink since killing that massive serpent days ago, and his throat felt like sandpaper. Some of the other members exchanged amused glances, clearly familiar with Marcus's habit of carrying alcohol everywhere. Well, Marco said that you killed almost half their original members during the takeover. Recruiting new people and properly assimilating the smaller gangs we've absorbed is taking considerable time and effort. Edrin's tone was carefully neutral as he delivered this information. It seems Marco didn't fully understand what I meant when I gave him those orders. Damian took another long drink, thinking. I don't need him to spend weeks recruiting and negotiating with every small-time gang in the region. Just butcher anyone who refuses to join and take over their territory by force. Simple. His casual tone when discussing mass violence made several students shift uncomfortably. They were still not used to the violence completely, but they were starting to find it less uncomfortable. Anyway, we'll visit them soon and speed things up considerably. I don't want to waste months just securing the outer region when there's so much more work to do. Damian's expression turned contemplative as he spoke, and everyone in the room immediately understood the implication. Another mission was coming soon. Edrin, Lysa, and Ronan exchanged knowing looks, but none of them seemed surprised or particularly concerned. In fact, they looked almost eager for it. Last time had been brutal and terrifying, but they'd all grown tremendously from the experience. Now that they were stronger, they wanted to test themselves again. Right, now that all of you have advanced in rank, I want you to start officially challenging noble students tomorrow. Issue the ranking challenges all at once together. Damian's crimson eyes swept across the group. I want every single one of you to replace nobles in the rankings. The top 50 should have all 32 of you represented, without exception, including you, Zav. He looked directly at Xavier, who straightened his back immediately. This time there was no trace of his usual anxiousness. Instead, Xavier slapped his chest confidently. Don't worry, boss, I won't disappoint you. Good, now all of you go practice your skills and weapon arts. I need to rest. It's been a very long day. Damian stood up with a massive yawn, clearly ready to collapse. But before anyone could move toward the exit, something unexpected happened. Kuro emerged from Damian's shadow like liquid darkness taking physical form, and landed gracefully on his shoulder. The raven's blood-red eyes swept across every person in the room, with an intensity that made them all freeze. Everyone felt an overwhelming pressure the moment Kuro's gaze touched them. It was different from Damian's slaughter intent, but equally terrifying in its own way. Like death itself was examining them, weighing their worth, deciding if they deserve to continue existing. "Boss, what the hell is that thing?" Ronan somehow managed to gather enough courage to speak, though his voice stuttered with barely controlled fear. "Oh, this is Kuro. I formed some kind of bond with him while training in the forest." Damian's tone was completely casual, like he was introducing a normal pet. "I forgot to mention him earlier with everything else going on." He reached up and gently stroked Kuro's dark feathers with obvious affection. Kuro immediately retracted his intense gaze from the others and rubbed his beak against Damian's cheek in an almost affectionate gesture before melting back into his shadow. The moment Kuro disappeared, everyone released breaths they hadn't realized they'd been holding. Damian seemed completely oblivious to how terrifying Kuro's presence had been for everyone else. That creature's pressure was suffocating. Whenever it looked at someone directly, they felt like death itself was staring into their soul, making every survival instinct scream in absolute terror. Only a complete monster like Damian, who'd already developed slaughter intent and spent weeks killing beasts in that forest, didn't feel Kuro's oppressive aura at all. "We should get going now, boss." "Yeah, you need rest. We'll see you tomorrow." "I have to train my weapon art anyway." "See you guys later." Almost everyone practically ran for the exit, making various excuses. Even Ronan, usually the bravest and most confrontational, was among the fastest to leave. What's gotten into them?" Damian watched their hasty retreat with genuine confusion, shaking his head. He was about to leave himself when he suddenly sensed a familiar presence and turned toward a specific direction. Officer Brian Olaf stood there in his standard SFD suit, hands in his pockets, watching Damian with an unreadable expression. "I'm being transferred back to Norrington City." Brian's words hung in the cool night air as he and Damian walked slowly through the Academy's eastern garden. It was late enough that they had the space entirely to themselves. The moon hung full and bright overhead, casting everything in pale silver light. Damian said nothing at first, just kept walking with his hands in his pockets. "When?" Damian finally asked after some time passed. "Tomorrow morning. I received the official transfer orders this afternoon." Brian's voice was carefully neutral, professional. "My replacement is already on their way to Tranquil City. The SFD wants someone new monitoring your therapy sessions and general activities. Since I didn't manage to give them a reason to come after you, they removed me." "I see, it was Ashley Blackheart who removed you, right?" "Oh, yes." More silence fell between them. They walked past a fountain, the sound of flowing water filling the quiet between them. "For what it's worth, I enjoyed our therapy session during those first 2 months. You are one of the few I enjoy talking with." Damian's voice was quieter than usual, almost reflective. "I think I'll actually miss having someone to talk with who doesn't want anything from me." Brian laughed, but it was a helpless, slightly bitter sound. "That's funny because honestly, those sessions felt more like therapy for me than for you." He ran a hand through his hair, his professional composure cracking slightly. "You were supposed to be my patient, someone I was evaluating and monitoring, but somewhere along the way, I started being the one who needed those conversations. The lie I have been living for a long time was shattered as well." Damian glanced at him but said nothing, letting him continue. "A lot has changed since we started those sessions, Damian. Things I didn't expect and the things I always avoided became more and more clearer in my head." Brian's jaw tightened. "You remember what you told me during one of our early conversations, about there being a traitor in the SFD, someone actively helping the Shadow Council operate?" "I remember. It seemed ridiculous at the time. Conspiracy theory nonsense from a paranoid student. But the more I watch how the department operates, The more I pay attention to what cases get prioritized and which ones get quietly buried. He trailed off, staring up at the moon. Your theory seems more and more accurate every single day. They reached a secluded bench beneath an ancient tree and sat down without discussion, both of them settling into the familiar silence that had characterized their later therapy sessions. The SFD has become obsessed with you. Completely obsessed, as if they want to find anything possible to implicate you. Brian's voice was low, almost confessional. They know about everything that happened at the academy today. The fight with the Imperial heirs, the injuries you caused, all of it. And they also know about your activities in the outer region of Tranquil City. Damian's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened slightly. How much do they know? Enough. They know you've taken control of former gang territory. They know about the protection racket you're running, though they don't have all the details. They know you've killed more people again. Brian pulled out 2 small bottles from inside his jacket. The Phoenix, the same impossibly strong alcohol that old man Mike had given Damian months ago. I thought, since this is my last night in Tranquil City, we should share a drink. A proper goodbye between 2 people who have spent more time talking than either of us probably wanted to. He handed 1 bottle to Damian, who took it without comment. Do I look like I'm a drunkard? Why does everyone keep on giving drinks to me? Well, fuck it. They opened the bottles simultaneously and drank in silence for a moment, the burn of the alcohol fierce and immediate. This stuff is terrible, Brian muttered. It grows on you. They sat there drinking slowly, watching the moon climb higher in the night sky. Stars were visible tonight, countless points of light scattered across the darkness. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost mocking given the conversation. You should be careful going forward, Damian, more careful than you've been. Brian's voice was serious now, the alcohol loosening his tongue enough to share things he probably shouldn't. The SFD is sending someone specifically to monitor you, not for therapy reasons but more like surveillance. They want detailed reports on everything you do, everyone you talk to, everywhere you go. Are you warning me as an SFD officer, or as someone who thinks the system is broken? Damian's question was direct, cutting through pretense. Brian was quiet for a long moment, taking another drink. I don't know anymore, maybe both, maybe neither. He laughed again, that same helpless sound. You know what's funny? When we first met, I was completely suspicious of you. Thought you were dangerous, unstable, probably guilty of many secret crimes we didn't know of. You can't blame me. Your past is completely different from how you behave and how things unfolded in the Norrington incident. And now I think you might be the sanest person I've talked to in months, which is either a compliment to you or a confession that I have become insane as well. Damian allowed himself a small smile at that. I'll take it as both. They drank more, the bottles slowly emptying as the night deepened around them. I became an SFD officer because I wanted to help people, genuinely help them. Brian's voice had taken on a distant quality, like he was talking more to himself than to Damian. I had this idealistic vision of what law enforcement could be, protecting the weak, bringing criminals to justice, making the Federation safer for everyone regardless of their status or background. What changed? Reality is completely different from an idealistic view. Watching how the system actually operates instead of how it's supposed to operate, I wanted to bring a change. But as time passed by, the system changed me. Brian stared down at his bottle. The SFD doesn't exist to help people. It exists to maintain order. And maintaining order means protecting the powerful, controlling the dangerous, and keeping everyone else in their designated places. Sound like you've had a crisis of faith. More like a crisis of reality. Faith implies there was something worth believing in to begin with. Damian took another drink, studying Brian's profile in the moonlight. The officer looked tired, not physically exhausted like Damian had been earlier, but mentally and emotionally drained. Like someone who'd been carrying too much weight for too long. You remember that other officer Brian you told me about during our first session, the one with the same name as me? Brian's question seemed to come from nowhere. Damian went very still, his hand tightening slightly around the bottle. I remember. You said that officer started out idealistic, wanting to make a difference, but eventually became just another dog for the higher-ups, following orders without question even when he knew those orders were wrong. That's right. What happened to him in the end? You never finished that part of the story. Damian was silent for several long moments, his mind drifting back to memories that belonged to a different life entirely. He could see it so clearly even now, that final confrontation on the skyscraper's roof. Officer Brian's face twisted with regret and self-loathing as his last words hit his consciousness. Him standing at the edge, wind whipping around him, knowing there was no escape left. The horror in Brian's eyes as he smiled and stepped backward into empty air. That officer. Damian's voice was quiet, almost distant. He probably received tons of medals and commendations for his service, awards for being the best dog his masters could ask for, loyal, obedient, and efficient. He took another drink, the alcohol burning down his throat. But in the end, I think he regretted all of it, every compromise he made, every order he followed that he knew was wrong, every time he chose his career over his conscience. Damian turned to look directly at Brian, his crimson eyes reflecting the moonlight. He spent his whole life becoming exactly what he swore he'd never be, thinking everything he was doing was in the name of justice. He was the righteous one. And when he finally realized it, when he finally understood what he'd become, it was too late to change anything. But I'm not sure what he really thought. This is just my interpretation. Brian held his gaze for a moment, then looked away, his jaw working. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to name directly. Sometimes I wish I'd been born in different times. Your times, maybe. Brian's voice was barely above a whisper. I saw those commoner students earlier today, the ones kneeling before you with genuine devotion. The ones who'd follow you anywhere because they believe you'll actually protect them and give them something worth fighting for. He laughed bitterly. And I thought, maybe if I'd met someone like you when I was younger, before I got so tangled up in the system, maybe I could have been one of them. Maybe I could have found something worth being a dog for, instead of just blindly serving people who see me as nothing more than a convenient tool. Damian didn't respond immediately. He finished his bottle of Phoenix and set it down carefully on the bench between them. Then he stood up, looking down at Brian with an expression that was impossible to read. I'll be coming to Norrington City in a few weeks to meet with my family. I can leave the academy for some time thanks to my connections. His voice was calm, measured. If you really want to escape being the wrong kind of dog, if you genuinely want to find something worth serving instead of just serving blindly. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. You should have an answer ready for me when I arrive. Think about it carefully between now and then. Take your time, but be completely certain. Brian looked up at him, understanding dawning in his eyes. This was a recruitment pitch. Damian was offering him a way out, a different path, a chance to become the kind of person he'd always wanted to be, even if it meant abandoning the official system entirely. And if I say yes, if I decide to take whatever you're offering, then you become part of something that's actually trying to change things instead of maintaining them. You help build something new instead of protecting something rotten. Damian's voice carried absolute conviction. But understand this clearly. The people I work with, the people who follow me, they're not just employees or subordinates. They're family, and family means loyalty goes both ways. I protect them, support them, help them grow stronger. But in return, I expect complete honesty and commitment. And if I say no, then we finish our drinks, say goodbye like civilized people, and never speak about this conversation again. You go back to Norrington City, continue your career with the SFD, and live whatever life you choose. Damian's expression softened slightly. I'm not going to threaten you or pressure you, Brian. You've been decent to me when you had no reason to be. You tried to be fair even when your orders were to find something to use against me. That counts for something. He started walking away, his footsteps quiet on the garden path. Think about what kind of person you want to be, not what kind of officer, not what kind of subordinate, just what kind of person. Brian watched him go, sitting alone on that bench beneath the ancient tree with the empty bottles beside him. The moon continued its slow journey across the sky. And Officer Brian Olaf sat in silence, his mind churning with possibilities and fears and hopes he'd thought were long dead. He understood exactly what Damian was offering. A chance to change. A chance to actually help people instead of just maintaining order. A chance to be the kind of law enforcement he dreamed about when he was younger and more idealistic. But it would mean betraying the SFD, abandoning his career and becoming a criminal in the eyes of the very system he dedicated his life to serving. Could he do that? Should he do that? Did the potential to actually make a difference justify turning his back on everything he'd built? Brian pulled out his watch and stared at the SFD badge displayed on the screen. Then he looked up at the stars scattered across the night sky, searching for answers they couldn't provide. What the hell am I supposed to do? The question hung in the empty garden, unanswered. Somewhere in the distance, Damian walked back toward his dormitory, his mind already moving to the next problems he needed to solve. But part of him wondered if Brian would take the offer. And part of him hoped he would. Because people like Brian, people who still cared about doing the right thing even when the system made it almost impossible, were exactly the kind of allies Damian needed most. The kind who wouldn't just follow orders. The kind who would question, challenge, and push back when necessary. The kind who had principles worth fighting for. The garden remained silent and empty as the night deepened. Two men with their own paths, their futures hanging in the balance. And only time would tell which direction Officer Brian Olaf would ultimately choose. The next day, Damian woke up after a long, much-needed sleep. His body still ached in places, and his mind felt foggy from exhaustion, but it was nothing compared to how he'd felt after guiding 32 students through their aura breakthroughs. He dragged himself to the bathroom and freshened up again, trying desperately to wash away the persistent bloody smell that seemed to cling to him. Last night after returning from the garden, he'd already taken a long shower, scrubbing his skin raw. But the smell of death still lingered somehow. After spending 2 months constantly hunting and killing beasts, only occasionally washing in lakes whenever he stumbled across one, the scent had apparently soaked into him deeper than soap could reach. After another thorough cleaning session, he finally put on his academy uniform again for the first time in what felt like forever. Looking at himself in the mirror, Damian couldn't help but notice how much he'd physically changed. His height had increased by several centimeters, making him noticeably taller than before. His crimson hair now fell past his shoulders, long enough that he needed to tie it back in a knot to keep it out of his face. His facial features had become sharper, more defined, losing the last traces of childish softness. He looked older, more mature, undeniably handsome in a way that surprised even him. Is this because my rank keeps increasing, clearing waste and impurities from my body? or just because I'm going through normal teenage growth. He honestly wasn't sure which factor was more responsible. Well, I was handsome from the start anyway. I'll just keep getting better looking in the future. He. His narcissistic thoughts were interrupted by more practical concerns. I wonder if Edrin and the others have started their ranking challenges yet, or if they're waiting until afternoon. Damian left his room soon after, his mind already organizing the day's priorities. He needed to visit the student council chambers today to deal with Victor Cross and his attempt to ban the Mafia. But before that confrontation, he decided to meet Professor Salazar Blackwood to learn the next stages of the Omega Point weapon art. He was always busy with something, and he didn't want to risk being pulled away again before learning the advanced stages of his weapon arts. Better to get the knowledge now while he had the chance. He left his room, which he didn't change even after he became top-ranked, and headed toward the training facilities where receptionist Annie, his so-called senior sister, would be working. She'd know exactly where to find Professor Blackwood. Annie looked exactly the same as always, hunched over behind the reception counter with her head down, completely absorbed in whatever was on her communication device. "Hey, Annie." Oh, it's you." Her head snapped up immediately, brown eyes lighting up with genuine excitement. "Junior brother, you really are such a badass. Look at how handsome and cool you look in this video." She practically shoved her device into Damian's face before he could respond. The screen showed footage from yesterday's confrontation, clearly recorded by some student in the crowd. The angle was actually quite cinematic, showing Damian using his telekinesis to pull a cigar and lighter through the air, then lighting up casually with his boot pressed firmly on Leonard's humiliated face. Mitchell and Iris were visible in the background, lying broken and half-conscious in pools of their own blood. It is pretty cool, actually. Whoever edited this together really knew how to capture the best angles. Damian studied the video with the critical eye of someone who understood the importance of image management. Then he noticed the title, "The King is Back." He stood there speechlessly for a moment, processing the melodramatic headline. But honestly, he didn't mind the hype at all. He'd always paid careful attention to his public image, both in this life and his previous one. If he were just operating alone, this much attention might have been problematic. But as the leader of the Mafia, the more his reputation grew, the more people would fear standing against his organization. Fear was a useful tool when wielded correctly. "It's cool, isn't it?" Annie asked with literal stars shining in her eyes, then proceeded to blatantly look him up and down with obvious appreciation. "You're becoming more and more handsome by the day, junior brother. You even got rid of that ugly scar across your face. Now you look more like a muscular scholar than a brutish thug." "What do you mean I looked like a brute before? And what the hell is a muscular scholar? Is that even a real term?" "Yes, it's cool. Thank you for the compliment, Annie." Damian's response was perfectly calm and polite, but his internal monologue was anything but peaceful. "Annie, can you tell me where Professor Blackwood is currently? I need his guidance on something important." "Oh, Master, he's at the outdoor shooting range right now. Actually, it seems like he wanted to meet with you too. I was about to send you a message." Annie's tone suggested she knew more than she was saying, but Damian didn't press. "I see, I'll head there now then." He started walking away before Annie could trap him in another lengthy conversation. Okay, see you later, junior brother." Annie waved enthusiastically as she watched him escape. "Silly junior, always running away from me." The outdoor shooting range was located behind the training facilities, a massive open area with reinforced barriers and targets set up at various distances. It was designed specifically for students and professors practicing long-range weapon arts and marksmanship. but it was mostly occupied by Professor Salazar and him. As Damian approached, he could hear the distinctive sound of gunshots echoing across the space. But these weren't the controlled, measured shots of target practice. These were angry, violent discharges that spoke of frustration and rage. Boom, boom, boom. When Damian finally reached the range and could see clearly, he found Professor Salazar Blackwood standing alone in the center. The normally jolly professor looked completely different. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, his face twisted with anger and frustration. His gun, a beautiful custom piece that normally only saw careful, precise use, was being fired repeatedly at the distant mountains. Each shot was infused with massive amounts of aura, creating devastating explosions against the rocky peaks in the distance. Chunks of stone and earth were being blown apart with each discharge. Salazar wasn't practicing, he was venting. Professor Blackwood, Professor Blackwood. Damian's voice cut through the sound of gunfire. Salazar spun around immediately, his expression shifting from anger to something far more complicated when he saw Damian standing there. Pain, guilt, frustration, sadness. All of it flashed across his face in seconds before he forced himself to take a deep breath. Damian, you're here. His voice was rough, strained. He lowered his gun and gestured toward the observation table nearby. Come sit, we need to talk. The serious tone made Damian's internal alarm start ringing. He followed Salazar to the table and sat down across from him, studying his professor's face carefully. Something was very wrong, and judging by Salazar's expression, it was directly related to Damian somehow. Salazar sat down heavily, placing his gun on the table between them with more force than necessary. He opened his mouth to speak several times, then closed it again, struggling with how to begin. Finally, he just sighed deeply and looked Damian directly in the eyes. You know I'm from an imperial family, right? The Blackwood family. Yes, I learned about the imperial families from Adrian Murdoch. Damian's tone was neutral, giving nothing away. Salazar nodded slowly, his jaw working. Then you should understand what I'm about to tell you carries weight that goes far beyond just this academy. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The news and videos of what you did yesterday have spread beyond just the student forums. They've circulated through all the noble social circles. Every major family knows about it now. Even many academies across the Federation have seen footage of you dominating 3 imperial heirs simultaneously. It's trending everywhere. Damian remained silent, simply listening. The entire top-level hierarchy of our world now knows your name and face. They know you easily defeated Mitchell Thorne, someone no peer has ever managed to beat in combat. Only a handful of older noble children from previous years have more impressive records than Mitchell had. Salazar's hands clenched into fists on the table. The 13 imperial families are not happy about this situation. Their carefully maintained image of superiority and dominance has been publicly shattered by a commoner student, and they don't tolerate that kind of embarrassment. Damian's expression remained calm, though his mind was already working through the implications. I knew yesterday's display would attract attention. That was partly the point, but I didn't anticipate it spreading this quickly or reaching this high. They've started applying pressure, significant pressure. Salazar's voice was bitter now, angry at himself more than anyone else. They reached out directly to all the professors who have been teaching you. They delivered a very clear message. Stop providing any guidance or instruction to Damian Valcor, or face serious consequences from your respective families. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Professor Serafina told them to fuck off, essentially. She cut ties with her noble family years ago and doesn't care what threats they make. Her background in the military is strong as hell. A ghost of a smile crossed Salazar's face. But I can't do the same. His expression crumbled, frustration and self-loathing written clearly across his features. I'm still deeply connected to the Blackwood family. I have parents, siblings, cousins, people I care about who depend on me maintaining good standing. I can't just burn those bridges without implicating their lives too. He looked down at his hands. They forced me to officially sever the master-disciple relationship between us, and made it very clear that if I continue teaching you, there will be severe consequences for everyone I love. Damian sat perfectly still, his face calm and neutral as he absorbed this information. He said nothing, nor did he interrupt the man as he sat there listening. Salazar's frustration only grew watching Damian's composed reaction. "Why aren't you saying anything?" His voice rose sharply, anger mixing with desperation. "Shouldn't you be furious about this? This is blatant injustice. They're punishing you for being talented and strong. They're trying to cripple your growth because you embarrass their precious heirs. Would being angry change anything?" Damian's voice was soft, almost gentle. Would showing frustration make the imperial families suddenly decide to be fair? Would my rage convince them to lift their restrictions? He met Salazar's eyes directly. "The world was never fair to begin with, Professor. I learned that lesson a long time ago. Being angry at injustice doesn't fix it. It just wastes energy that could be spent finding solutions." Salazar stared at him, completely taken aback by the response. "Besides," Damian continued, his tone remaining calm and measured, "this weapon art was never truly mine in the first place. The Academy gave me the choice to select any arts I wanted. As for the guidance, technically it's also a given that it will be provided. But you chose to teach it to me out of your own generosity and recognition of my potential, without any bias, even going through extra effort to make me understand everything. I'm genuinely grateful that I even received the guidance I did. Many students never get that opportunity." "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point." Damian's voice was firm now. "You gave me something valuable without any obligation to do so. The fact that external forces are now preventing you from continuing doesn't erase what you've already given me. I don't blame you for choosing your family over me. That's what any reasonable person would do." Salazar opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, his anger deflating into something more like despair. "How can you be so calm about this? How can you just accept it without any resentment?" "Because I understand the position you're in, and because I can see that you're more frustrated about this than I am." Damian's expression softened into a warm smile, as if it wasn't a big deal. "The fact that you're this angry on my behalf, that you're struggling with this decision so much it's driving you to shoot mountains in frustration, that tells me everything I need to know about your character." He stood up slowly. "I know your heart, Professor Blackwood. Seeing you this upset for my sake is already more than enough. You've been a good teacher and a decent person. That matters to me more than any benefit I gain from you." Damian bowed his head slightly, a gesture of genuine respect. "Thank you for everything you've taught me, Master." Salazar's breath caught in his throat. In all the time they'd worked together, through all the lessons and training sessions, Damian had never once called him Master. He always addressed him as Professor or Professor Blackwood, being respectful but still distant. And now, at the moment they were being forced apart, Damian used that title for the first and last time. The irony was crushing. "Damian, wait, Damian, wait." Salazar's voice cracked slightly as Damian turned to leave. Damian stopped and looked back, one eyebrow raised questioningly. Salazar stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the ground. His expression was conflicted, torn between duty and principle, fear and courage. They forced me to sever our official relationship. They demanded I stop teaching you. His hands clenched at his sides. But they can't actually stop me from showing you something right now, in this moment, before you leave. Understanding dawned in Damian's eyes. I can't be your master anymore after today. But for the next hour, for right now, technically our relationship hasn't officially ended yet. Salazar picked up his gun, checking the chamber with practiced efficiency. So I'm going to teach you the remaining levels of Omega Point, all of them, everything that I know. However much you can absorb and understand based on your own comprehension, that's yours to keep. He moved to the firing position, his professional demeanor sliding back into place. Watch carefully, I'm only doing this once. Salazar raised his gun and aimed at a distant target, a massive boulder at least a kilometer away. Level 3 of Omega Point is based on the principle of spatial severance called channel shot. You've mastered Level 2's convergence shot, where your bullet harvests ambient aura as it travels and grows stronger with distance. His aura began building, far more than Damian had ever seen him use before. Level 3 takes that principle further. The bullet doesn't just harvest aura, it compresses space itself around the projectile. Boom! The shot was different from anything Damian had seen before. The bullet left the barrel, and immediately reality seemed to warp around it. The air itself cracked and shattered like broken glass as the projectile tore through space. The trajectory wasn't straight. It curved impossibly, bending around obstacles, as if the bullet was choosing its own path through folded dimensions. When it hit the distant boulder, the impact didn't just destroy the rock. It erased it. A perfect sphere of empty space appeared where the boulder had been, edges so clean and smooth it looked like reality itself had been scooped out. The spatial compression allows you to change the bullet's direction mid-flight by manipulating the folds you create. You can curve shots around cover using your willpower, hit targets from impossible angles, and the impact damage increases exponentially because you're not just delivering kinetic force, you're delivering spatial rupture. Salazar's voice was clinical now, falling into lecture mode. The key is understanding that space isn't fixed, it's flexible and malleable. Your aura can fold it like paper if you have the will and control. He reloaded smoothly. Level 4 is called Singularity Shot. Watch closely because this is where theory becomes art. His aura changed quality entirely. It became dense, oppressive, warping the air around him. At this level, you're not just compressing space, you're punching through multiple layers of reality simultaneously. One bullet becomes many, each one existing in a slightly different dimensional layer. Boom! This time, 5 different impacts appeared across 5 different targets simultaneously, even though Salazar had only fired once. The single bullet had split across dimensional boundaries, creating multiple versions of itself that all existed and hit their marks at the exact same moment. Each version is real and each of them has an impact that is genuine. You're essentially firing one shot that exists in 5 places at once by fragmenting it across spatial layers. Salazar lowered his gun, his aura dissipating slowly. And then there's level 5. His expression became distant, almost wistful. I've never achieved it myself. It's purely theoretical based on extrapolating from the patterns of previous levels. But the concept is this. If level 4 splits one bullet across multiple dimensions, level 5 would allow you to fire a bullet that exists in all dimensions simultaneously. What would that even look like? Damian asked, genuinely curious. I honestly don't know. A shot that can't miss because it hits every possible location at once. A bullet that transcends causality itself. It's beyond my understanding. Salazar set his gun down on the table with finality. But I believe it's possible. I believe someone talented enough, someone with enough understanding and will, could reach that level. He looked directly at Damian. I hope that someone is you. I hope one day you'll master level 5 and prove it's not just theory. That would make all of this worth it somehow. And it would make Omega Point reach SS rank grade, the first gun weapon art in history to ever achieve this level. Damian stood silently for a moment, processing everything he just witnessed and learned. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. I owe you a favor, Professor Blackwood. This is a genuine debt. Whenever you need something from me, anything at all, you can ask. I'll do everything in my power to help. Salazar's expression crumbled completely. As Damian turned and walked away, the professor stood frozen, watching his former student's back disappear into the distance. What favor? What right does a master who abandoned his disciple have to ask for favors? This kid, he never talked about debts or favors when I was teaching him officially. He just learned and improved and occasionally thanked me politely. But now, when I'm forced to cut him loose, when I'm choosing my family over his future, he treats what I taught him today as a personal favor. As if he's not the one being monumentally screwed over by circumstances completely beyond his control. Salazar's hands clenched into fists, so tight his nails cut into his palms. Blood dripped slowly onto the ground. He looked up at the sky, clouds drifting slowly overhead, and felt something break inside his chest. I might have just made the biggest mistake of my entire life. That kid is going to change the world one day. I can see it in his eyes, in his conviction, in the way he refuses to be broken by injustice. And I'll be remembered as the coward who abandoned him when he needed guidance most. Abandoned him when he was being oppressed by my very own people. All because I was too afraid to get my loved ones involved. The realization was crushing. Salazar stood alone in the empty shooting range, staring at nothing, as the weight of his choice settled onto his shoulders like chains. And somewhere in the distance, Damian walked away without looking back, his mind already cataloging the techniques he'd witnessed and planning how to master them without a teacher's guidance. And the consequences of yesterday's violence were only beginning to unfold. Damian walked out of the shooting range silently, his expression perfectly neutral. But deep inside, he couldn't stop the creeping sense of disappointment from settling into his chest like a cold stone. He was still human after all. Getting abandoned by one of his own teachers hurt more than he wanted to admit. The rational part of his mind knew this was inevitable. He'd seen it coming from miles away the moment those videos started circulating. His teachers were nobles, his rivals were nobles, his enemies were all nobles. Ever since arriving at this academy, he'd been completely surrounded by this suffocating social construct. It was like a rope slowly tightening around his throat, getting closer and closer each day until he could barely breathe. No matter how much he talked about treating everyone equally in his mafia, the reality was that not a single noble had ever joined his organization. Not one. They feared him, respected his strength maybe, but they would never follow him. I don't understand this world sometimes. In his old world, children weren't dragged into this kind of political warfare. Sure, there were family businesses and legacy expectations, but not like this. Here, the moment kids turned 15 and awakened their abilities, they were immediately shoved into a reality where all the comfortable illusions about a united human race living peacefully in the Earth Federation completely shattered. Suddenly, everything became crystal clear. No matter how hard you worked or how talented you were, you needed to attach yourself to certain families if you wanted to survive and advance. Families who would use you for their own benefit without a second thought. Families who couldn't tolerate some commoner being better than their carefully groomed heirs. Families who didn't look at commoners as fellow humans, but as servants and tools meant to be exploited in every possible way. Their goal was never to make humanity stronger as a whole. They just wanted to maintain their position at the top of the hierarchy, regardless of how much everyone else suffered in the process. They didn't even care if humanity as a whole became weaker and weaker. Would you care about how your property was feeling? Would you worry if your tools were happy? The answer was obviously no. You'd only care about the price and quality, whether it was worth the investment or not. Deep in these dark thoughts, Damian suddenly understood the fundamental mentality driving the noble class. Commoners were products, nobles were buyers. The better the quality, the higher the price you could demand. And people like Damian, who refused to be bought and sold, who broke the expected patterns and hierarchies. They were defects in the system, errors that needed to be corrected or eliminated. So all these academies, which supposedly started with the noble goal of supplying fresh warriors for the battlefields against monsters, have somehow transformed into conditioning centers where commoners are meant to be broken down and reformed into obedient products. Damian's lips curved into a bitter, humorless smile as he walked aimlessly through campus. His entire figure cut a strangely melancholic picture. A powerful young man who just dominated 3 imperial heirs, now wandering alone with slumped shoulders and distant eyes. Sensing his turbulent emotions through their bond, Kuro materialized on his shoulder and looked directly into Damian's eyes with unusual intensity. The intelligence shining in the raven's crimson gaze was almost unsettling. Damian reached up to gently stroke Kuro's dark feathers, finding comfort in the familiar gesture. Kuro, why does no world ever seem to have authorities that genuinely care for their people? I never understood it in either of my lives. His voice was quiet, almost talking to himself. Is it because I was always an outlaw, always on the wrong side of the law? Or is there something fundamentally broken about power itself? Why do I consistently find more humanity in the eyes of so-called criminals than I ever see in those who hold authority and make the rules? Kuro didn't reply with words, but his eyes became even sharper, more focused, as if communicating something only Damian could understand through their connection. Right, you're absolutely right. Damian nodded slowly, a new determination forming. Why don't we find out ourselves? When we're the ones with authority, when we control everything, when we hold all the power in our hands, I guess we'll finally have our answer to that question, won't we? A genuine smile crossed his face, small but real. Maybe we'll be different, or maybe we'll become exactly what we hate. Only one way to know for certain. Damian looked up at the cloudy sky overhead, his crimson eyes filling with sharp determination that cut through the earlier melancholy like a blade. So what if the club's committee refuses to give us official resources? I'll acquire everything we need through my own methods. His voice grew stronger with each sentence. So what if those imperial families pressure my teachers to abandon me? I'll learn by myself. I've done it before. So what if I lose access to their precious skills and weapon arts? I'll create my own techniques, better ones. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. I never wanted to get deeply involved in all this political garbage. This noble versus commoner bullshit is exhausting and time-consuming and completely pointless. But time and time again, this broken system keeps standing directly in my way, blocking everything I try to build. A cold laugh escaped his lips. I guess we really are enemies then. You people started this conflict. So don't blame me when I'm the one who ends it. I'm going to dismantle this entire corrupt system that you benefit from, piece by piece, until nothing remains. Damian's expression shifted, becoming distant as different thoughts warred in his mind. I was worried before about the bigger threats, the mutated beasts growing stronger, the monsters beyond the portals. The calamities this world is supposedly going to face according to the stories that old beggar told me in my past life. He shook his head. But fuck all of that. I'm not a hero. I never wanted to be one. There are people far stronger than me who can deal with those existential threats. People who actually get paid and respected for that kind of work. His voice turned harder, more selfish. I'm just one person trying to survive in a world that keeps trying to crush me. So like any smart survivor, I'll focus on gathering resources and building power for when the real winters come. I'll make sure my people and I survive whatever happens, and everyone else can fend for themselves. The current Damian was a walking contradiction, though he didn't fully realize it himself. Ever since arriving in this world with memories of a completely different life, his mind had been occupied by too many conflicting thoughts and emotions. He genuinely didn't understand his own feelings half the time. Sometimes he was genuinely kind, helping people selflessly like he'd done with the Mafia members yesterday. Other times he was an absolute maniac, torturing enemies with a smile on his face. Sometimes he wanted to be purely selfish and only look out for himself and his closest allies. Other times, whenever people approached him for help, he felt an overwhelming urge to protect them even when it brought him no benefit. His moods shifted like the wind. His goals seemed to change daily. From start to finish, he himself didn't truly know what choices he'd make in any given situation, what he genuinely wanted to accomplish, what he actually cared about deep down, or even what he really felt. Everything about his identity was a mystery, even to himself. Maybe he was just a man who did whatever felt right in the moment, never questioning or analyzing his own motivations too deeply. But there was one thing that had never changed across both his lives, one constant that burned like an eternal flame. His hunger for power. That desire blazed in his crimson eyes with intense fire that never dimmed, never wavered, never died. Everything else might be uncertain and contradictory and confusing. But the need to become stronger, to have enough power that nobody could ever force him into anything again. That was absolute. Damian stopped walking and looked at his own reflection in a window. The face staring back at him was handsome, mature, confident. But the eyes seemed ancient and tired, carrying weight that no teenager should possess. "Let's go, Kuro, we have work to do." His voice was steady again, the moment of vulnerability passing like a brief storm. First Victor Cross and his pathetic attempt to ban the Mafia. Then we visit Tranquil City and speed up the territorial expansion. And after that... He smiled coldly. After that, we start building something these nobles can't ignore or suppress. Something so powerful they'll regret ever trying to stop us. Kuro cawed softly in agreement, his crimson eyes reflecting the same determination. Together, they walked toward the student council building, ready for whatever came next. The sadness and disappointment were still there, buried deep. But they were fuel now, motivation and reminder of why power mattered. Why he could never afford to be weak again. Why he would burn down this entire corrupt system, if that's what it took to protect what was his. The game continued. And Damian Valcor was done playing defense. Inside the student council room, the most powerful students in the entire academy sat gathered around a long, polished table. At the head sat Elizabeth Murdoch, third-year student and council president, her purple hair catching the afternoon light streaming through tall windows. Her violet eyes were distant, unfocused, as if her mind was somewhere far away from this room. Victor Cross stood at the opposite end of the table, presenting his case with the confident air of someone who believed he'd already won. He was the top-ranked second-year student, a C-rank awakener, and vice president of the club's committee. His brown hair was perfectly styled, his uniform immaculate, his expression righteous and determined. The so-called Mafia organization has become a destabilizing force within this academy. They've encouraged violence between students, disrupted the established social order, and created unnecessary conflict where none needed to exist. His voice carried practiced authority as he paced slightly, gesturing for emphasis. For the good of all students and the Academy's reputation, I propose we officially ban the Mafia and declare it an illegal student organization. Any students who continue to associate with it should face disciplinary action. Around the table, the other council members listened with varying expressions. Michiel Thorne sat with visible bandages wrapped around his ribs and one arm in a sling. His golden hair was slightly disheveled, his normally confident posture diminished. He stayed completely silent, his golden eyes fixed on the table in front of him. Michiel was talented, yes. Arrogant, absolutely. But he also respected genuine power when it was demonstrated so thoroughly. Damian had defeated him easily, again, in front of hundreds of witnesses. His family had seen the videos. His friends had seen his humiliation. His pride had been shattered into pieces that couldn't be easily put back together. What excuse could he possibly make now? Adrian Murdoch sat nearby, his purple eyes watching Victor with analytical calculation but saying nothing. His expression was carefully neutral, revealing nothing of his true thoughts. Gareth Blackwood leaned back in his chair, his massive bear-like frame making the furniture look small. His black hair was tied back simply, and his dark eyes studied Victor with obvious skepticism. Arielle Voss sat with perfect posture despite her petite frame, her gray eyes sharp and assessing. Her black hair was cut short and practical. Naomi Lark fidgeted nervously with her navy blue hair, her glasses sliding down slightly as she looked between different speakers with obvious anxiety. Liam Evergreen looked relaxed and handsome with his distinctive green hair and eyes, but his expression was thoughtful rather than dismissive. Mara Kestrel sat in the corner, her broad shoulders tense, her hands clenched into fists on the table. Her shaved sides and long hair tied back gave her an aggressive appearance that matched her current mood perfectly. Her teeth ground together audibly as Victor continued speaking. She remembered everything with burning clarity, how her family's name had been dragged through the mud, how she'd been beaten unconscious in front of the entire academy, how Damian had insulted the entire Kestrel noble house without consequence. But she couldn't do anything about it now. Gareth had already put Damian in his place that day, even forced him to resign from the council. That should have been enough. Except it clearly hadn't been. The other council members were also present. Rex Dalmir with his braided dark hair and tan skin, Selena Hart with her amber eyes and quiet demeanor, Jonas Harrington looking cheerful despite the serious topic, and Alina Dre with her elegant platinum hair. I think we should wait before making such a drastic decision. Gareth's deep voice cut through Victor's speech. Victor, I know you're deliberately creating an issue for Damian Valcor. You should reconsider this path. Victor's jaw tightened with irritation. I'm simply proposing what's best for Academy stability. You're pushing an agenda. Gareth's tone was flat, factual. I stood against Damian that day because he crossed a clear line by attacking Mara. But I'm not going to support manufactured conflicts designed to suppress him for political reasons. Arielle nodded her agreement, her gray eyes serious. We shouldn't start another major issue right now. The Academy is already chaotic thanks to all these conflicts. And Victor, you should be focusing on your upcoming battlefield deployment in a few weeks when the entire second year gets sent to fight monsters, not on student politics. Victor paused, his confident expression flickering slightly. Then he straightened his shoulders and pressed forward. The Academy is a mess specifically because of the Mafia in the first place. So why not simply ban the organization and end all these problems at the source? His voice grew stronger, more insistent. "We have the authority to make this decision. We should use it." Several other council members began nodding, their expressions agreeing with Victor's logic. These were supposed to be the strongest, most capable students the Academy had produced. Students who could theoretically fight above their ranks, who represented the peak of their generation. But they were also the ones who decided to isolate Damian the moment he became a symbol for commoners. The ones who'd made him realize he was everyone's enemy simply for being too talented. Hypocrites running the same social construct they claimed to be managing fairly. Probably only Ariel, Naomi, and Elizabeth had never actively antagonized Damian among those present. Victor raised his voice, seeing Gareth and Ariel still opposing his proposal. "Don't you all already know that the imperial families have started suppressing that commoner? From what I've heard, they've already pressured multiple professors into refusing to guide Damian anymore." He moved closer to Gareth with a knowing smirk. "Doesn't Gareth already know about this personally? Considering your uncle Salazar Blackwood, who was Damian's master in the Omega Point weapon art, has been forced to sever all ties with him." Silence crashed through the room like a physical wave. Everyone's eyes went wide with genuine shock. They'd known the families would do something to restore their damaged reputations. That was expected. But they hadn't thought the response would go this far. Making Damian lose all support from professors was harsh enough. But forcing a master to sever ties with his disciple. Complex expressions spread across multiple faces. In their world, the master-disciple relationship was considered sacred, more important than romantic love, more binding than friendship, sometimes even stronger than blood-family ties. It was essentially like forcing a father to abandon his son. The cruelty of that move was staggering. Only Damian himself, still not fully accustomed to this world's cultural values, probably didn't realize just how humiliating and devastating that action was meant to be. Elizabeth's face went pale, all color draining from her features. Her hands trembled slightly where they rested on the table. How cruel can they be? How unfair? His only fault was being better and more talented than his peers. That's all. Everything is turning worse than I expected. I warned everyone at the start. I personally spoke with Gareth, Liam, Naomi, and Ariel, asking them not to make an enemy of Damian. Yet no matter what I do, everything keeps spiraling more and more out of control. Her seer abilities had been screaming warnings at her for weeks, but the visions were too fragmented to understand completely. All she knew was that blood and conflict were coming, and Damian stood at the center of it all. Liam sat with a judgmental expression on his handsome face. He had no personal problems with Damian, but the way he'd brutally treated Mara had damaged his image in Liam's mind. There were lines you didn't cross, even in conflict. One person at the table didn't show hate or approval. Selena Hart, the quiet second-year girl with amber eyes, simply sat and observed without speaking. Victor pressed his advantage, sensing the shifting mood. "You see, the families have already moved against him. Damian will get no more resources from official channels, no more guidance from professors. So why not put the final nail in the coffin and ban his organization entirely? End this situation cleanly before it gets worse." His voice carried triumphant certainty. "We have the power to." Bang! The council chamber doors exploded open with a deafening crash. Damian walked in casually, his crimson hair tied back, his uniform somehow making him look more dangerous rather than civilized. A wild, manic smile played across his handsome face as his cold eyes swept across the gathered council. "Don't stop on my account. Please, continue your little discussion about how to fuck me over. This is fascinating to watch." Silence, a deathly silence spread throughout the room. His tone was light, almost cheerful, but carried an undercurrent of violence that made several council members tense. He looked around the room with exaggerated confusion. "Oh, there's no chair for me. How terribly rude." Then he raised his voice slightly, calling out toward the kitchen attached to the council chamber. "Robert, are you here?" The door to the kitchen opened immediately, and an older man in butler's attire stepped out. Robert Gilligan had been the student council building's butler for quite a few decades. He'd seen countless students come and go, countless councils rise and fall. And in all that time, he'd never felt as wronged on someone's behalf as he did for Damian Valcor. "Young Sir Damian." Robert's voice carried unusual warmth and respect as he quickly retrieved a chair from storage. He placed it carefully behind Damian, treating him with more deference than he'd shown any council member in years. It looked more like Robert was Damian's personal butler rather than the student council's employee. "Thank you, Robert. You're always so reliable." Damian sat down comfortably, completely ignoring the shocked expressions around the table. "How has your life been treating you lately? Your daughter's wedding is coming up soon, right? How are the preparations going?" Robert's stern face actually softened into a genuine smile. "Very well, sir. Thank you for asking. She's quite excited, and your generous gift was deeply appreciated by the entire family." During the time Damian had spent in the council, Robert was the one who interacted with him the most. So, he came to know about the wedding of one of Robert's daughters as well. Damian had bought the wedding dress as a gift for them, in advance with the help of Annie, and given it to Robert during that time. "It was nothing, don't worry too much about it." Damian waved dismissively. "Now I'm quite hungry. Do you think the kitchen staff could prepare something? Whatever's readily available is fine." "Of course, sir, immediately." Robert clapped his hands twice sharply. Kitchen staff appeared instantly, carrying trays of food that seemed suspiciously pre-prepared, as if Robert had anticipated this request. They set everything in front of Damian with practiced efficiency, then disappeared back into the kitchen. The entire council sat in stunned silence, completely ignored and bypassed. Damian had been an official council member for only a few days total before resigning. Yet somehow, every single staff member in the building treated him better than they treated the actual council. Robert remained standing behind Damian's chair like a loyal retainer. Damian picked up a fork and knife, examining the food with interest, then casually waved the utensils at the council members. "Please, don't let me interrupt your important discussion. Continue talking about whatever you were saying before I arrived." His tone suggested he had absolutely no idea what the topic had been, as if this meeting had nothing to do with him or his organization. Adrian and Mitchell exchanged complex looks, watching Damian's audacity in front of the strongest students in the academy. Neither of them would have the courage to do something like this. The sheer disrespect was staggering. Elizabeth's violet eyes fixed on Damian with an expression impossible to read. She still said nothing, just watched. Victor's face went red with anger and frustration. "This meeting is about your criminal organization, about the Mafia disrupting academy order and—" "Oh, is it? I had no idea." Damian took a bite of food, chewing thoughtfully. "Continue then, I'm listening now." Victor's jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. He launched into another passionate speech about how the Mafia was bad for the academy, listing reason after reason, his voice rising with each point. Damian kept eating calmly throughout the entire tirade, occasionally nodding as if Victor was discussing the weather. When Victor finally stopped to catch his breath, Damian set down his utensils. "Are you done?" The casual question made Victor's face turn even redder. Before he could respond, Damian's gaze swept across the other council members. "You know, I'm getting really tired of all this hypocritical bullshit. So let me make this simpler for everyone. His voice turned cold, cutting. Just say what you actually mean. Be honest for once in your privileged lives. You're all so fucking insecure that you can't handle watching commoners rise above your comfortable positions. You can't stand seeing an organization leading people you've always looked down on. And you only care about protecting your own benefits, which my mafia is disrupting. Silence. Stop hiding behind nonsense about academy stability and order. Just admit you want me gone because I'm inconvenient. Because I'm changing things you want to stay the same. Because I'm making you all look bad. Victor's face had turned an unhealthy shade of red, his hands trembling with barely controlled rage at being called out so directly. How dare you speak to us like? Thunk. Damian's knife flashed through the air and embedded itself into the polished table directly in front of Victor, the blade quivering from the force of impact. The sharp sound echoed through the suddenly silent chamber. Victor's words died in his throat, his eyes going wide as he stared at the knife mere inches from his hand. Learn to listen as well, boy. Damian's voice was utterly calm, almost conversational, which made it somehow more threatening than if he'd been shouting. I wasn't finished speaking yet. You've been running your mouth for the past 20 minutes without interruption. Surely you can extend me the same courtesy for a few seconds. He leaned back in his chair, his crimson eyes fixed on Victor with predatory intensity. Now then, who the fuck do you think you are, exactly, trying to get my organization banned? What gives you the authority or the guts to even attempt something like that? Victor opened his mouth again. I'm the vice president of the club's committee, and I have every right to. You have the right to manage club funding and facility usage. You don't have the authority to ban student organizations without overwhelming evidence of genuine harm to the academy. Damian's tone was factual, cutting through Victor's bluster. And we both know you don't have that evidence, because it doesn't exist. The Mafia hasn't actually violated any academy regulations that dozens of other organizations haven't also broken. His smile turned sharp and dangerous. You're just mad that commoners finally have someone protecting them from noble bullshit. That's your real problem here. Stop being a hypocrite and admit it's just your wounded pride. That's enough, Damian. Gareth's deep voice carried a warning tone as he straightened in his chair. You shouldn't break more rules and resort to violence again. You're acting like a brute who can't control himself. Do you not remember the lesson I taught you 2 months ago? The reminder of that brutal beating hung in the air. Damian turned his gaze to Gareth, and his manic smile widened into something genuinely unsettling. Oh, I remember that lesson perfectly. Every single second of it is burned into my memory with absolute clarity. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. And I'm absolutely planning to provide detailed feedback on that lesson before you graduate, Gareth. A very thorough review of your teaching methods. I promise you'll remember it just as clearly as I do. The threat was barely veiled. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. You really are just a violent thug with no proper upbringing. Mara's voice cut through the tension from where she sat in the corner, her face twisted with spite. Even your own master abandoned you without a second thought, but I suppose your behavior explains everything perfectly. Who would actually want such a disciple in the first place? Someone so crude and disrespectful. Complete silence fell across the room. Even Victor stopped moving, sensing he just witnessed someone cross a line they shouldn't have. Damian's smile vanished instantly. His expression went completely cold and empty, all the manic energy draining away to be replaced by something far more dangerous. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. A dark red energy began leaking from Damian's body, swirling around him like smoke. It was thick, oppressive, carrying the scent of blood and death. Gareth's eyes widened in genuine shock. Elizabeth sat up straighter, her violet eyes going sharp and focused for the first time since the meeting started. Ariel's gray eyes narrowed with recognition and concern. All three of them were B-rank awakeners, experienced enough to recognize what they were seeing. Slaughter intent. The rarest and most dangerous manifestation of killing, will that only appeared in those who'd taken countless lives and embraced the act of killing on a fundamental level. How does a 15-year-old student have slaughter intent? What has he been doing? How many things has he killed to develop this? The questions raced through their minds as they stared at Damian with new understanding. This wasn't just a talented student anymore. This was something else entirely. Mara. Damian's voice was low as he opened his mouth. You're a stupid bitch. You always have been. But I thought you at least had enough intelligence to keep your mouth shut about topics you don't understand. His slaughter intent pulsed stronger, making the air itself feel heavy. Everyone in this room knows the real reason my relationship with Professor Blackwood ended. The imperial families pressured him, and he didn't want his loved ones getting involved in all this. That has nothing to do with. It has everything to do with you running your mouth about things that are none of your fucking business. Damian's eyes locked onto her with such intensity that Mara actually flinched backward. You want to talk about masters and disciples? Fine. Let's talk about how your family uses and discards people the moment they're no longer convenient, about how many servants and subordinates the Kestrel house has abandoned over the years when they became liabilities. That's different. It's exactly the same. The only difference is I don't pretend to be honorable while doing it. Gareth's voice cut in again, harder this time. Mara, be quiet. This isn't helping anything. His dark eyes were serious as he looked at his fellow council member. My uncle is involved in this situation. I won't have you insulting him indirectly by misrepresenting what happened. Mara's jaw clenched, but she fell silent, her face still twisted with resentment. Damian took a slow breath and forcibly reined in his slaughter intent. The oppressive atmosphere lightened slightly, though the tension remained thick. You know what? I'm done with this pointless conversation. Damian stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Victor Cross, I'm officially challenging you to a ranking combat match in front of the entire academy today in the central courtyard. Victor's eyes widened, then narrowed with arrogant confidence. You're challenging me, a C-rank awakener. You're still what D+ rank at best. His laugh was genuinely amused. I accept, of course. It'll be satisfying to put you in your place properly. Show everyone that your little victory against first years means nothing against someone with real experience. He crossed his arms, his confidence absolute. Your Mafia is just a gathering of losers playing at being powerful. Once I defeat you publicly, that pathetic organization will collapse entirely. The commoners will realize they've been following someone who can't actually protect them. Damian's smile returned, cold and knowing. We'll see about that. Suddenly, watches around the table began buzzing with notifications. Mitchell and Adrian both pulled out their devices, their expressions shifting to something bizarre and confused as they read. What's happening? Liam asked, noticing their reactions. Why are you both getting so many notifications? Adrian and Mitchell exchanged a glance, their faces showing genuine shock. Around 32 of the top 50 first-year students just got challenged to ranking matches. Adrian's voice was carefully neutral. All of them are nobles. Silence. Who challenged them? Liam leaned forward with interest. Mitchell and Adrian both turned their gazes toward Damian simultaneously. The Mafia. The word hung in the air. Mara let out a derisive laugh from her corner. So what? They'll lose. Those commoners might have gotten lucky with a few scattered victories, but they can't match nobles in organized combat. This is just going to embarrass them. Mitchell's hand tightened around his watch. Then he spoke, his voice flat and factual. They already won, all of them. Complete silence crashed through the room. What? Victor's confident expression faltered. The Mafia challenged everyone in the top 50, except the SS-ranked talents and a few others. Mitchell continued reading the results. Edrin Kale defeated Simon DeSirian. Ronan Hale defeated Quinn Zander. Lysa Morwin defeated Ruby Frey. Xavier Wells defeated. He kept reading, name after name, victory after victory. Every single Mafia member had won their challenge matches. 32 nobles had been systematically removed from the top 50 rankings and replaced by commoners. In a single coordinated operation that must have been planned for days. So, Edrin and the others managed to win. Looks like I didn't waste my time on them. Damian's smile widened as he watched the shock spread across every face in the council. Victor, you were saying something about my Mafia being a gathering of losers. His voice was light, almost playful. I must have misheard you. Could you repeat that? Victor's face had gone pale. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. The other council members were staring at their own devices now, confirming the results, reading the detailed reports coming in from across campus. This wasn't possible. Commoners couldn't defeat nobles in organized challenges. The resource gap was too large. The training advantages were too significant. And yet it had just happened, 32 times simultaneously. Elizabeth's violet eyes were filled with surprise and something else. He planned this. He probably coordinated this entire operation to happen just when he came here. But how did he manage to make the Mafia members strong enough to bridge the gap with the nobles? Damian pulled his knife from the table with a smooth motion, examining the blade briefly before storing it away. I'll be issuing my formal challenge to you in a few minutes, Victor. Make sure you arrive at the central courtyard on time. Wouldn't want you to forfeit by absence. He turned toward Robert, who still stood near the kitchen door. Thank you for the excellent food and hospitality, Robert. As always, you've been wonderful. Of course, young Sir Damian, it was my pleasure. Robert actually bowed slightly, treating Damian with more respect than he'd shown any council member in years. Damian walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Just before leaving, he paused and glanced back over his shoulder. Oh, and one more thing for all of you to consider while you sit here in your comfortable positions. His crimson eyes swept across every face. The Mafia you're trying to ban just took control of nearly 2/3 of the first-year top 50 rankings, in one day, without my direct involvement. He let that sink in. Imagine what we would have been able to accomplish if the treatment for commoners was the same. Would it be humanity's loss or gain? The door closed behind him with a soft click. The council chamber remained frozen in shocked silence for a long moment. Victor stood at the end of the table, his face pale and his confidence shattered, staring at the door Damian had just walked through. He just agreed to fight someone who'd orchestrated a complete restructuring of the Academy's power dynamics, while eating lunch and making small talk with the butler. And he was starting to realize he might have made a terrible mistake. Elizabeth sat at the head of the table, her head bowed as her eyes remained closed. Her visions were changing. Blood and fire and Damian standing at the center of it all, unstoppable and terrifying. What have we done? What have we all done by pushing him this far? But it was too late for regrets. The pieces were already in motion. And Damian Valcor was done playing defense. 15 minutes earlier, Central Training Grounds. The Central Training Grounds were packed with students. Word had spread like wildfire through the first-year forums that something big was about to happen. Multiple ranking challenge matches being issued simultaneously, all targeting noble students in the top 50 rankings. Hundreds of students had gathered to watch, forming a massive crowd around the various combat rings that had been set up across the grounds. The atmosphere was electric, with anticipation and tension. Did you hear? The Mafia is challenging a bunch of nobles all at once. Are they insane? Those nobles have way better resources and training. Not everyone is like Damian, you know. I heard most of them already recovered from yesterday using expensive healing potions. Only the SS-rank talents are still injured. This is going to be a massacre. The Mafia students are going to get destroyed. Among the crowd, several former Mafia members stood watching with complicated expressions. They'd left when things got difficult, when Damian disappeared and the pressure from nobles became too much to handle. Now they were about to watch the people who'd stayed loyal, potentially, get humiliated in front of everyone. Should we have stayed? Damian is very strong. We all saw what happened yesterday. One of them muttered quietly. Don't be stupid. Look at who they're fighting. These are top-ranked nobles with family backing and expensive training. There's no way. The matches are starting. The crowd's attention snapped to the combat rings as the challenge students began entering. Ring 1, Edrin Kale versus Simon Desirian. Simon stood in his combat ring with complete confidence, his spiky black hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. His injuries from yesterday had been completely healed using his family's expensive recovery potions. He cracked his knuckles, gray aura already flickering around his body. Edrin Kale, right, the smart one from Section A. Simon's voice carried casual dismissal. I've been training with my family's instructors since I was 7 years old. This won't take long. Edrin stepped into the ring calmly, adjusting his glasses with one hand, while his other rested on the twin short swords at his sides. I appreciate the confidence. Makes what's about to happen more satisfying. Simon's eyes narrowed. Arrogant for someone about to. The official raised his hand. Begin. Simon immediately activated his weapon art, gray aura condensing into razor-sharp wind blades that shot toward Edrin from multiple angles. Storm Cutter. Edrin's tactical skill flared to life. His enhanced perception showed him every trajectory, every timing, every weakness in the attack pattern. He drew both swords in one fluid motion and moved. Not away from the attack but through it. His blades deflected wind blade after wind blade with minimal movement, each parry perfectly angled to redirect rather than absorb the force. He closed the distance in seconds. Simon's eyes widened in shock as Edrin appeared directly in front of him, swords already in motion. How did you? Slash. Edrin's blade opened a shallow cut across Simon's chest, drawing first blood. Then his other sword came up, disarming Simon's hasty defense. Your attack patterns are predictable. You telegraph every move half a second before executing. Against someone with tactical analysis skill, you might as well be fighting in slow motion. Edrin's voice was clinical, educational even. His swords moved in a blur. Slash, slash, slash. 3 more precise cuts appeared on Simon's arms and legs, not deep enough to cause permanent damage, but painful and debilitating. Simon tried to counter, his gray aura flaring desperately. But every attack was deflected or avoided with minimal effort. Edrin made it look easy, almost boring. Like an adult sparring with a child. Do you understand now? Resources don't matter if you don't have the foundation to use them properly. If we had the same resources as you, we would have utterly squashed you. Edrin swept Simon's legs out from under him and placed a sword at his throat. Yield. Simon stared up at him with absolute shock and humiliation. I yield. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. One of the top nobles had just been completely dominated by a commoner. Ring 2, Ronan Hale versus Quinn Xander. Quinn stood across from Ronan with visible nervousness, despite his healed injuries. He remembered the gymnasium incident, remembered watching Ronan's monstrous strength in action. But he couldn't back down now, and nobles didn't lose to commoners in ranking matches. They couldn't afford to. I won't go easy on you just because we've talked before. Quinn tried to sound confident. Ronan's massive frame cracked his knuckles, his dark bronze skin gleaming with gathering aura. Good, I wasn't planning to go easy either. Begin. Quinn immediately created distance, knowing getting into close combat with Ronan would be suicide. He pulled out a whip crackling with yellow lightning, his family's specialized weapon. Lightning Serpent. The whip lashed out with incredible speed, the electrified tip aiming for Ronan's torso. Crack! Ronan caught the whip with his bare hand. The lightning crackled across his aura-hardened skin harmlessly as he stared at Quinn with a predatory grin. My turn. He yanked the whip hard and Quinn flew forward involuntarily, unable to release his weapon in time. Ronan's other fist met him halfway. Boom! The punch caught Quinn square in the face, his defensive aura shattering like glass. Blood exploded from his nose as he crashed backward, sliding across the ring floor. Get up, I know you're tougher than that. Ronan's voice was almost encouraging. Quinn struggled to his feet, vision swimming, and activated his inherited skill. Golden electricity covered his entire body, amplifying his speed dramatically. He became a blur, attacking from multiple angles. Ronan didn't try to dodge. He just stood there and let Quinn's electrified attacks bounce off his Titan-enhanced body. Each hit created sparks but did no real damage. Are you done yet? Quinn's confidence finally broke. He tried to retreat, to create distance again, but he was too slow. Ronan's hand grabbed his face and lifted him off the ground effortlessly. I said, are you done? Then he slammed Quinn into the ground with devastating force. Boom! The impact cratered the ring floor and Quinn didn't get back up. The official rushed forward to check. Quinn Xander is unconscious, winner Ronan Hale. The crowd's shocked murmurs grew louder. 2 victories, 2 complete dominations. Ring 3, Lisa Morwin versus Ruby Frey. Ruby stood in her ring with her arm still in a sling, heavily bandaged from yesterday's brutal encounter with Damian. But she'd recovered enough to fight, and her pride demanded she not back down from a challenge. Even if her opponent was the Mafia's best archer. This is bullshit. I'm still injured and they're making me fight. Ruby's complaint was loud enough for the crowd to hear. Lisa stood at the opposite end with her bow ready, her brown hair tied back practically. You could have declined the challenge. Nobody forced you to accept. And look like a coward, never. Then stop complaining and fight. Begin. Ruby immediately activated her family's inherited water manipulation technique, creating dozens of floating water spheres around herself. Tidal barrage. The spheres shot forward like bullets, each one capable of punching through stone. Lisa's sensory skill tracked every single projectile simultaneously. She moved between them like a dancer, her body flowing around each attack by the narrowest margins. Then her bow came up. THWIP. An aura arrow materialized and flew towards her opponent. Ruby's water shield intercepted it as the arrow dispersing harmlessly. You'll have to do better then. THWIP, THWIP, THWIP. 3 more arrows in rapid succession, with each one coming from a slightly different angle. Ruby's water manipulation struggled to track them all. Then one arrow got through, grazing her injured arm. She screamed, the pain from her existing injury amplifying. "You bitch, that's my injured arm. Then you should have protected it better." Lice's voice was cold and unsympathetic. "THWIP, THWIP, 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 THWIP." A continuous barrage of aura arrows flew, each one precisely aimed at non-lethal but painful targets. Ruby tried to maintain her water shields while attacking back, but her injury made the coordination impossible. An arrow pierced her thigh. Another hit her shoulder. And a third caught her side. None were lethal or permanently damaging, but the pain was overwhelming. Ruby collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "I yield, I yield." The official called it immediately. Winner, Lysa Morwen. The crowd was going absolutely wild now. 3 matches, 3 dominant victories by Mafia members. Ring 4, Xavier Wells versus Ralph Eddington. Ralph stood in his ring with visible confidence despite yesterday's beating. He'd trained extensively with his family, had access to expensive resources, and his opponent was literally from Section D. The weakest section. "This should be easy." "Nothing personal, Wells, but you're out of your league here." Xavier stood across from him, gripping his spear with both hands. His face showed none of his usual anxiety. Instead, there was a strange calm, almost eerie focus. "I know I'm weak compared to you, in resources, training, and everything." Xavier's voice was steady. "But boss taught me something important. Being weak doesn't mean you lose. It just means you have to fight differently." Cute philosophy, but it won't help you in the fight. "Begin." Ralph immediately closed distance, his dual daggers glowing with blue aura. Frost strike. The daggers came at Xavier from 2 directions simultaneously. Xavier's spear moved in a wide arc, deflecting both attacks clumsily but effectively. Then he countered with a straight thrust, but Ralph dodged easily. Too slow. But Xavier wasn't aiming for Ralph. His spear struck the ground between them, and his aura exploded outward in a shockwave. Ralph stumbled backward, with his footing disrupted. Xavier immediately pressed forward, his spear work becoming a whirlwind of desperate, aggressive strikes. No technique or elegant form was involved. Just relentless, overwhelming offense that gave Ralph no room to counter. "What the hell kind of fighting style is this?" Ralph's voice carried genuine confusion. "It's called not dying style." Xavier's spear caught Ralph's dagger and disarmed it. Then he drove the butt of his spear into Ralph's stomach. Thud. Ralph doubled over, gasping. Xavier's spear spun, and the blade edge pressed against Ralph's throat. "Yield." Ralph stared up at him in absolute disbelief. "How, you're from Section D?" "I yield." The words came out choked as the crowd exploded with noise. Even the weakest Mafia member had won. All around the training grounds, match after match played out across the various rings. Marcus, the beer-loving student, defeated his opponent through sheer unpredictable fighting that looked more like drunken brawling than martial arts. Selene, with her twin daggers, moved like a shadow, dismantling her opponent's defenses with surgical precision. Ariana, despite not fighting directly, used her spatial storage to swap weapons mid-combat in ways her opponent couldn't predict, creating openings that led to victory. Every single Mafia member was winning. The crowd's energy had shifted from skeptical anticipation to absolute shock to something approaching awe. They're actually doing it. They're actually beating nobles. How is this possible? Look at their teamwork. They've clearly been training together for months. These aren't random commoners like us anymore. This is an actual organization with real coordination. Among the watching students, the former Mafia members stood frozen. They'd left because they thought the organization was doomed, without noble backing and resources. They'd abandoned their brothers and sisters because it seemed like the smart, safe choice. Now they watched those same people systematically dismantling the noble rankings. "We fucked up," one of them whispered. "We really fucked up." Another could only nod, his face pale. They'd chosen safety over loyalty. And now that choice was going to haunt them. Final results. When all the matches concluded, the results were undeniable. 32 Mafia members had challenged 32 noble students. 32 victories. 0 losses. The top 50 rankings had been completely restructured in a single coordinated operation. The crowd stood in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. This wasn't just about individual victories. This was a statement, a declaration that the old order was over. That commoners weren't subordinates anymore, they were equals. And in some cases, they were superior. The Mafia was rising, and the academy would never be the same. The central training grounds were still buzzing with energy and shock when Damian arrived. The crowd parted instinctively as he walked through, students stepping back to create a clear path without even realizing they were doing it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be SUPRISC for all of you. Stay tuned.